Namaskar. July 15, Thursday, and welcome to Daily Global Insights with Sree and Sree. This is episode number 204. Let's go straight to global news. China resumes military flights from disputed military bases in South China Sea with an incompetent US administration at the helm. China threatens to nuke Japan if it intervenes in Taiwan intervention as an exception to no first use policy. The Chinese regime is in its waning days, according to former US Ambassador Brownback. Taken together, why is China back to again rattling its saber, sir? Why is it so taken up with Japan?
It's rattling its saber because there's no voice of dissent from anywhere. In prior, you have seen there used to be voice of dissent coming from United States. There used to be voice of dissent coming from France. There used to be even voice of dissent coming from Israel to say that it will support those nations that are under threat. So there's no voice of dissent that's emanating. And most symbolic thing here that needs to be expressed here is around the South China Sea, especially the bases in Spratly. Spratly Island sprang up, if you recall, during the Obama
Right.
years. I keep saying, because I'm using this very seamlessly because there seems to be not much of a difference. But this goes back to the Biden-Obama period. This is when all these bases came up and they were built, and they've been silently building, but it sprung up. The second is that they clearly recognize that there's a much closer coordination between Japan and Taiwan. And Japan has been front and center in terms of saying, Taiwan is a red flag. Taiwan is a red flag. And their perceptive reactions come from the fact if Taiwan is taken, next is Senkaku. From there, they will make their way into Japan, right? So therefore, there's a much closer coordination. So which is why there's a lot of saber rattling by China. It is testing the waters of the international resolve. It was again during that period, going back in time, when ICJ ruled around South China Sea in favor of those islands like Philippines and so on. But the fact is that China never listened, right? China cared two hoofs for it because, again, there's an incompetent global central body such as United Nations and the nations that support. So that's where you are seeing all this rhetoric.
A generation of young Afghans face end of the US era as chaos beckons with government forces rapidly collapsing before the Taliban onslaught. Taliban continues to gain control of the territory with claims and counterclaims. China blames bomb after a bus blast kills 13, including 9 Chinese. Sir, people say Taliban is occupying between 30% to 85% of modern day Afghanistan. Your thoughts on this? And now they have gone for some talks in Doha, Qatar. Where do you think those are headed? What is the reason for that? And also now China is beginning to see some fallout from all these activities in Pakistan.
Basically, I think you've asked a number of questions. First and foremost, where do I see Afghan? I think it's a matter of time. They're given 6 months, including the present Afghan administration in power. They said, in 6 months, either we're going to have a peace, or we're going to have a coexistence, or we're going to have, perhaps a takeover by Taliban. So they, I think, well advancing their way. You can calculate percentages, 80, 60, 70. The fact is Taliban is well on its way. And notwithstanding the brave front that is put up by the Afghan forces and commandos, the Taliban behavior will not change. They will do exactly the same. I think they're going to come back with a much stronger resolve, and they're going to focus inward rather than trying to pry their stuff in all over the place because they recognize the price that they paid for it. So they're going to be much more brutal and aggressive within their own territory and guarding and protecting all their resources. As far as the Chinese, the China issue and the threat both in Afghanistan as well as Pakistan is, at least clearly in Pakistan, many of these tribes and other people have completely opposed the presence of China in their territory, and you're beginning to see some of these consequences that is flowing from it. So that's the, you're going to see skirmishes. I don't think it's a cakewalk for China to say, okay, we're going to walk in and give money, and these fellows are going to roll over and give access to all the resources which are trillions of dollars to be excavated and taken out. It ain't going to happen.
And Russia quotes ASEAN on guns and jabs with countries caught between the United States and Russia. Belarus government cracks down on all activist group with raids and arrests. And Uyghur Turks should live as equals to China. Turkey's Erdogan tells Xi. That's a first, sir.
Well, I think that first and foremost, we'll probably do some stage a more detailed deep dive. Not many people know Russia is the number one supplier of arms to ASEAN countries. It roughly translates to about close to $12 billion of arms annual. US comes second, around 7. Then you have France and other countries. So Russia is the largest supplier. And also Russia is a supplier to the old communist regimes which became independent, much more mainstream. Vietnam, Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, all part of the 6 out of the 10 ASEAN countries, imports arms from China. And that just tells you that Russian footprint is very strong, notwithstanding the fact they may not have been wagging their tail or saber rattling in that part of the world. So I think that's the second part. The final part is that now they're saying that many of these countries, Sinovac has not been very successful. US lack of production, vaccines are unable to reach. So you are now in a situation where how come, I have Sputnik, which is fairly effective. India is using it. Some of the countries in Europe are using it. So let me kind of move forward with that vaccine. So this whole concept of jab and gun strategy, where it can occupy a much more softer spot relative to United States or other nations. It's very sad, but that's the truth.
And President Hassan Rouhani says Iran can enrich uranium to 90% purity at any time. This is a little bit of a thing in doubt because we know that many of their enrichment facilities have been destroyed by Israel. At least that's what Israel claims. And your thoughts on this, sir? Is this essentially embellishing the truth?
I don't know whether it's a rhetoric because there's been a lot of blasts and destructions that have been going around. If they can do 90%, then I'm sure that Israel may have different answers to that proposition. So I think I see this more as a rhetoric. Now, coming to one point which I didn't respond to your previous segment or prior segment, the Uyghur Turks should be part of. It's an interesting proposition, whether it's the media or whether Erdogan himself is telling Xi. It begs the question. We haven't seen much, but we are reporting it because the reason is we're discussing it because that's just the initial snippets of the rumor that he says, I am, as you all know, Erdogan is now trying to project himself as the next real czar who is ready to liberate and also by doing a political posturing. So I see that point as more political posturing, but it's a very interesting observation that you have tried to highlight, but these Uyghur Turks being treated same as the Chinese. So, sorry, I just wanted to respond. I didn't respond to that question that you had asked.
Emerging information from South Africa is showing that after protests run amok over the arrest of President Zuma, there's been a lot of violence. But now news is emerging that the violence appears to have been directed, squarely at Indian emigrants from that are based in South Africa. These are the ones who are, essentially store owners and things like that. It could be the fact that stone owners are being impacted. I don't know, sir. Your thoughts on this? Is this going to be something more than what just is coming out as news? What are your thoughts, sir?
The ethnic Indian community, very similar to many of the African nations, if you recall, are a combination of both business as well as academic fraternity. It's the same in South Africa. When you have a civil war like this brought about as a result of Zuma, who's a communist, being put behind bars. So naturally, they use this occasion, and there's been economic collapse virtually in South Africa. So the consequence is you pick easy targets. Who are the easy targets? It is the ethnic Indian community with businesses. because the other the white South African community is all largely in mining businesses. So it's very sad, but that's where it holds. I don't know whether we can draw any other conclusions other than opportunistic rather than specific ethnic targeting.
And let's take a look at India news now. India is largely on track with COVID-19 vaccination programs per Venugopal Narayanan, a journalist who has written in Swaraja. Sir, with your permission, I will put up the graphic for this so we can talk to that. So I have the numbers out here, sir. It shows about all the state union territories, Andamans, Andhra Pradesh, Arunachal Pradesh, and so on, all the way down to West Bengal, and the shortfall or the excess as of 12th July. That chart is on there, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think that there's different types of reports that come out. We reported the Aravind Panagaria observation. We are now reporting Venugopal's observation based on the data that he has collected. And when you go state by state or state and union territory, you look at about 10 of the states. India overall is minus 1%. So in other words, it's 1% below target in terms of its administered versus allocated percentage. But by and large, many states seems to be well ahead of their targets that has been established. So basically what the message that comes out is the vaccination program seems to be on target, and this is subject to the supplies coming through ahead of time in the coming months. So numbers, when you take a look at this, these numbers do look very positive within the context of what is being projected. And even when you corroborate it with other forms of data, you do look at close to 400 million. As on 12th July, when I take a look at this, there's about 457 million doses. That is no, not 457. This total administration is 120 million for that specific month, of which the doses administered is 45,796,000. Percentage of July target achieved is 38%, and still we have some more distance to go. Overall, India is very close to 400 million vaccines. If they can hit that magic number of 500 to 600 million, that means according to Panagaria at least, there is an eligible universe of 850 million to be vaccinated. So if you have 500 to 600 million people vaccinated, that is at the rate of 100 million per month, which is at the rate, between 3 to 4 million vaccines average per day, then India is at least reasonably safe as the Delta variant, takes its shape and escalates or scales, or the epidemic is seen in India. India already has Delta variant. So that would be my observation on the vaccination side.
Sir, a quick look down the table shows that the non-BJP governments at the state are the ones that are the worst performers. And it's whether it is by design or just plain inefficiency, we don't know. We're just seeing the data, and we are saying it from seeing the data. Blatant violation of COVID-19 norms. Ministry of Home Affairs asked state governments to rein in as people flock to malls, hill stations, and markets. In fact, we've got a lot of pictures on social media sharing this information. So we have to see why is it that suddenly the states feel that they can move about. We don't know, because Delta is lurking around the corner. Stay safe and stay at home. If Kejriwal cannot handle, hand over Delhi to Haryana and we will address the issues, says Haryana CM. And India's e-commerce business expected to reach 120 billion by 2025. Maruti Suzuki to invest 18,000 crores in setting up a new factory in Haryana, and it will be producing about 1 million cars annually. So starting with the Haryana news saying that if Delhi is not capable of running itself, Haryana will step in. That's a very interesting observation.
I think it's time that the Delhi issue is fixed. They have electricity problems, they have water problems, they have gas problems. Despite the best hospitals located in Delhi, they also have had COVID mismanagement problems. I don't know whether it's politically designed or whether they have. They seem to be at the top of the agenda as far as the agitations go. Any major agitations is concerned, they seem to be the ready reckoner in terms of supporting what happens in India. But in terms of the civic programs that are needed, they're very happy to throw away everything free, but in terms of delivery, very poor. So it's very appropriate the Haryana CM says, okay, please don't blame. If you can't manage, hand over the state. We'll take care of everything else, and you can contest for Haryana. And if you win, that's great. If you don't win, then we'll manage the affairs. I think that something has to be done to Delhi, because people who tell me we're in Delhi during this wave two, I mean, it was astonishing in terms of what was going on there.
And drone again spotted near international border in Jammu and after firing returns to Pakistan. Now India will not accept unilateral status quo change in line of actual control. Minister of External Affairs Jaishankar tells to China, and India is close to signing a 700 million deal to acquire 100 GE General Electric engines for Tejas Mk1 fighter jets from the United States. So your thoughts on this? It's a very important new forward-looking agreement where General Electric will be supplying these 404 engines.
Indeed, I think that this is very positive, and that also tells that there's still defense cooperation between United States and India, notwithstanding the fact that there has been a political change here, and there has been less and less of India-US news, which is making headlines. There's also less and less of, again, I'll make my pitch, there's less and less of Quad news, after the new regime has come in. And there's also less and less about this vaccination drive that US wanted to embark on with Quad. So there seems to be much more other matters that are being looked at by the US administration. So this is very positive within a corporate context, that the business are continuing to stay engaged. And it's very good for the Indian Army that they're getting those engines from the EU.
And according to Dr. R.M. Vasagam, Indian space program is far more advanced than China. Viewers, a request to click on the bell button in order to subscribe. When our program is live, please do click on the bell button. That seems to have better effect than clicking on the subscriber. These are all empirical evidence. We have no proof to say one way or the other, but here's a request. Sir, your thoughts on what he said, sir?
The two things I want to point out. One is that India has also done a deal with getting their P8I maritime reconnaissance planes. That's going to help it in terms of managing the submarine threats that come from China. I think they've got now a fleet of 10. I think 10 more to come. That again augurs well between the US-India cooperation. As far as the space, it is a known fact, but it's glad that this Dr. R.M. Vasagam has come out and spoken in public that not to worry, India is far more advanced and combat China on the space front. So, which is very good, because India is now moving more and more from commercial to more military and advanced research, and it's also offering its facilities very similar to NASA here, for people to use the services. There's also going to be commercialization taking place of the space program, where people can run launch their private satellites using the facilities there. All augurs well in terms of the integrated architecture of India in the space field.
And let's take a look at United States news. In one of the most astonishing and shameful decisions by the Biden administration, for which it gets slammed, it has barred fleeing Cubans by sea. Cubans are rallying in Florida. Communism is the last thing you want for a country like America. So this is now the Cubans who are trying to, come to the United States. US is not allowing them, but then they open the borders for somebody else. All this is just bizarre. I mean, no consistency in approach. So what is really going on? Whose bright idea is it now to stop the Cubans from coming ashore, sir?
Well, there's been a series of statements, which is including a statement from Mr. Biden, which is to say it is unsafe for people to make a flight, and so therefore please do not do. As far as the Department of Homeland Security, they have taken a position which is they're going to bar people from coming, which has prompted the center and the right to make a comment that the Biden administration, which is considered to be pro-communist, and communist friendly, especially with the progressives leading the agenda. They seem to be much more sympathetic to their communist leader across Cuba rather than to the genuine needs of the people. Remember, Miami is one of the largest Cuban communities, outside of Cuba itself. So it's very intriguing and very interesting the stance that the present administration has taken. Very unfortunate and soundly and roundly rightly critiqued. As you rightly said, we are willing to open the borders to all kinds of people, right? All kinds of people, untested for COVID, untested for any criminal records. They all can come in. But for these Cubans who are fleeing a regression, they are barred from coming in.
And the Biden administration is facing renewed pressure for Iranian outreach after it comes to light that four Iranian intelligence officials plotting to kidnap a journalist in New York City. The DOJ, Department of Justice, has charged these Iranian officials. It remains to be seen what action the Biden administration is going to take vis-a-vis the talks that are ongoing right now in Europe. Texas Senate approves election bill 18-4 along party lines despite no quorum in the House. Analysis of the ballot images in Georgia County show provable fraud in elections. Election Integrity Group has this to say. Again, I can't emphasize more. There is a book that is coming out from me, and that is going to detail all this. And this is a fictional book, of course, because I don't have proof, or at least when I wrote it, I did not have the proof. So please stay tuned on this. Absolutely amazing stuff that happened in the 2020 election. So your thoughts on what's happening in Georgia and Texas?
Texas is very clear. So it's moving forward with its voter laws, which is within its purview. If the Democrats here want to run away, so be it. The questions have been asked why they ran to DC. They ran to DC as both for symbolism, as well as basically to tell their Democratic colleagues, take control, take it out of the states and bring it so you can impose, very similar to police laws that you want to impose. You can also now impose the election laws right from the center. So you can determine how you want to do it, so that there is no way by which there is opposition and only one party. It's very much like a progressive agenda. So that's the symbolism. And there's also been criticism. There's some of these Democrats who flew. They were claiming their daily or per diems from the government, which they are entitled to, having actually fled from the state when the special session is in place. A typical Democratic approach. I'll keep the money in my wallet, but then I'll kind of critique the person who put the money in my wallet so that I can do what I want to do. That seems to be the agenda here. So the election audit, the election thing that now it is going to Pennsylvania, it is going to Arizona, it is also likely to go to Wisconsin and probably a couple of other states. So this thing is spreading. Arizona is now stating that there is a discrepancy between the audited votes and the votes actually that was counted and polled in determining the outcome for the Arizona elections. So this is now beginning to take its legs in its own way. The objective is not to change the presidency. The objective to establish there was no integrity, and therefore the rules need to be tightened.
Pramila Jayapal, the House representative from Washington State, has stated that the Biden administration's $3.5 trillion budget includes funding for pathway to millions of illegal immigrants. Of course, illegal immigrants of Democrats' choice, I must say. The White House, however, claims that it lacks the votes for $3.5 trillion reconciliation infrastructure plan. So your thoughts on this? I think this is a non-starter. I mean, you can do some, blatant mischief by allowing people to come in for about 2 months, but now the borders are again closed. There is now a lot of, massing going on the other side, and U.S. is trying to talk Mexico into regulating it at its border down south. All this is happening. Sir, why this madness? Right now, there is still a pandemic. US is still unable to control it. Not even 1 in 2 Americans are vaccinated. Why this madness?
Well, let's just analyze this a little deeper. When you look at the broad policies that is coming across from the Democratic Party, you can basically say the Democratic Party is divided probably into two groups. You have the progressive Democrats who want to take charge of the agenda and who say that enough has not been done in terms of its values and principles. Then you have the traditional Democrats who sit in the center and make decisions without sacrificing some of the principles around being little more socialistic relative to the more abrasive agenda these progressive Democrats are trying to pursue. So therefore, here we are talking about the progressive Democrats, who are hell-bent with no economic rationale, with a blind-sided faith of pursuing things that seems to only suit their purpose and principle, which is typically the case when you have communist types of regimes. So here is a person who says, don't worry, we have money set aside in the 3.5 trillion. We are going to find a way to fund and normalize. This is exactly what we have been saying, that all this green accord, clean water, every one of this, it'll be loaded and padded with numbers to support some of these efforts. Why? Because you can create saturated, concentrated areas of population, which mandates and guarantees this person who wants to be elected is elected, irrespective of any attempts to change the policy.
At this rate, we can expect more Ilhan Omars, Rashida Tlaibs, Pramila Jayapals, AOCs, all who will not be able to win a district council election outside of their chosen place, but in there they are uncrowned queens and kings. The reports indicate that most of the illegal immigrants who are part of the surge are no-shows after catch and release. This is something that was expected. They're just going to dissolve and melt away. The compliance rate is less than 25%. What it means is when the court date comes, at least that's how I read it, 1 in 4 or less than 1 in 4 are showing up for that date. That means the intent is just to come and melt away. But then magically, with Pramila Jayapal's resolution, suddenly these people will all become citizens and they'll start voting, and God knows what's going to happen. This country, I'm really, really scared the way it's going. Biden's claim of voter obstruction laws are getting a pushback. I think US needs a consistent single policy for elections. I think this is done and run its course. Your thoughts are before we move on to markets.
So here's the situation. The one line to summarize is, if the Texas Democrats fly to Washington, D.C., as one leader said, namely, it is to fight racism and discrimination, right? If they stay and ask to vote, it is to preserve the norm, as it's happening in Washington, D.C., which is the progressive agenda and progressive budgets, breaking the filibuster, using reconciliation process as a mechanism to get to their agenda. So it's like if it is this way, it suits me. If it is that way, then I will call it as racial and discriminatory. That seems to be the unfortunate trend that is going in. Now, we can conclude this section with that last one, which is very important. This never happened. United States is going to invite, Biden administration is going to invite UN human rights specialists to come and study whether there is racial injustice and inequality prevalent in the United States. UN experts are going to come and study the United States. So you can draw your own conclusions where we are heading as a nation.
And now let's take a look at markets. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell on Wednesday downplayed the recent string of high readings of inflation, telling Congress that price pressures will still likely abate. The S&P has gained and touched an intraday record, shaking off losses from Tuesday's session. The Dow session rose while the Nasdaq erased earlier gains to end lower. All taken together, the market is kind of treading waters because I guess the earnings season is just around the corner. And what do we read into Powell's statement, sir, before we do a wrap?
Powell's statement again reaffirms the position that he is not going to lift the pedal on the interest rates because it could be too soon. He is going to allow the asset bubble to continue, driven by seasonality as well as the specific demands arising from COVID and non-COVID situations. I think that based on the track record of Jerome Powell so far, we have to agree with him that we are not going to see bond vigilantes or pressure on the interest rates. The 10-year Treasury bonds interest rates. It's basically from 1.7, 1.8, which where we originally projected it's likely to cross 2%. It's fallen back to about 1.3, 1.4%. Will it flip the coin in the first quarter? Possibly. As far as 2021, this we have been saying all along, 2021 is the best year as far as the coming out of the COVID. And even, during COVID, we had market highs. We'll probably see, again, greater than 16, 17% returns across the three indices or three indexes. This is one of the best years. Then the reality will begin to set in as we get into 2022. One caveat again, we don't know what we don't know, which is namely the Delta variant impact. We'll cover that in the interest of time tomorrow. We're already 10 minutes past, we are into 30 minutes. But the active cases continue to rise in United States. We probably are the only people going on making this statement again. The active cases continue to rise, and most of it is Delta. So people have to be careful in United States because it's only a matter of another couple of months before we have the fall, and that's the flu season. Then it can all get out of control as it happened in 2020.
And with that, our news hangout comes to a close. We'll be back again tomorrow, bright and early. Namaskar, stay tuned, and do not forget to click on the bell button. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Namaskar.